Hey y'all, Grumpy Sound Guy here, and today I want to talk about audio mixers. I started to do a multifaceted series on TikTok with this, but it just kind of got really long, so it needs to be a YouTube thing. I want to preempt the whole conversation here with the idea that I'm trying to talk about middle market stuff here, clubs to county fairs. Some of the bigger pro touring companies are probably, especially nowadays, post-COVID, reaching down into that county fair market. So you may see some pro touring, consoles and mixers down and that stuff. But today we're going to really talk about, the working man's lineup of mixers. Mixers that are within that, I don't know, maybe 4,500, below range or whatever. I think the SQ is around 45 or 47, and that would definitely be at the top of the financial, bracket that we're going to talk about today. Most of the consoles that I'm going to talk about are consoles you're going to see in your local club, or you're going to see in your local church, or something like that. Some bigger churches have some, nicer desks and that sort of thing. But I think most of church production is operating within the boundaries of the consoles and the mixers we're going to talk about today. I want to start out with, kind of, in my personal opinion, and let me also preempt the conversation with this. Look, if I boof on your mixer, don't come at me, okay? If you're happy with the mixer you use, man, rock on with it. I'm happy for you. It's your gig, not my gig. I'm perfectly cool with you using whatever mixer gives you the results that your clients like and your clients pay you to give. So I'm just giving my own personal opinion on some of this stuff. CLP Audio does about 150 shows a year. We're a very small middle market company, and it's just me and a bunch of 1099 guys, going out here and getting things done. And that's really where I want to stay with everything that I talk about on this channel and over at TikTok and that sort of thing. So I'm going to start at what I consider to be, the bottom and kind of work my way up. Once we get about halfway through the pack, really the differences in consoles are more about workflow and personal preference, because I always say mixers are like opinions. Everybody has one, and everybody thinks their opinion's more important than somebody else's. Just like, guys that use XYZ mixer thinks it's the greatest mixer in the world. And, maybe for their application it is. I don't know. I'm not hating on anybody. I'm just giving my own personal opinion from my 30 plus years of experience of mixing and the stuff that I install, the large group of systems that I, maintain and go in and troubleshoot, a few times a year and stuff like that. So that's where all this is coming from. That's where my opinion is coming from. It's coming from a long, long history of, working on a variety of desks. I believe if you're going to be a strong sound engineer in today's market, you have to have, a versatile skill set, around a bunch of other mixers. So, we're not going to talk about Digico. We're not going to talk about, some of the higher end Avid stuff and Yamaha stuff. PM10 is blowing up the touring market right now. Pro Series Midas, which is actually my favorite big boy desk to mix on, is the Pro Series Midas stuff. But, so, we're going to stick in this middle market. We're going to kind of get with it. So, pitter patter, let's get at her. Presonus. Presonus is the first target on the list here. I have a jaded reputation with Presonus. I typically describe it as the bane of my existence. Presonus, when they first came out, man, they were like crazy cool. They really brought the whole digital thing to the affordability, brackets. You know what I'm saying? Like, they really, came out and had something that looked great on paper, was able to do all the things that us analog guys were doing with a couple front of house racks and a big old heavy analog console, with one mixer, and it got everybody's attention. It really ignited, the world that Behringer established with the X32. Presonus was the one that kicked the door open and said, hey boys, here we are. This is what we can do. This is how we can do it. And, this is a better way of doing business. I thought it was great. I was totally into it, was digging it. Had the opportunity to work on a bunch of them in the church scene and in a couple clubs. And unfortunately, it just did not pan out the way I really hoped it would. I think really the way all of us hoped it would, It took them forever to get the moving faders. I think maybe their newest version has moving faders. They have boofed at everybody's Wheaties for so long with their consoles that I think most people are just so gun shy about buying any kind of Presonus mixer that it just isn't going to happen. They could put out the holy grail of mixers now, and it'd probably take them 10 years to win back that customer base. Kind of goes back to what I always say about running a business is, it takes years and years to, win a customer, but only seconds to lose one. And man, that's kind of how it happened, man. I mean, I used to put together mobile systems for, a big Baptist church that did church plants and stuff. And there was some of that stuff floating in and out of there. I did a whole bunch of troubleshooting and workshops around the Mid-Atlantic with churches that had that stuff permanently installed. And I mean, the mixers just had a mind of their own. You could not depend on them things, especially the first generation. Second generation got a little better. The AI is a little better even yet. I mix on an AI every week at a church that I work with. Love the church, love the people. They're doing the best they can do with the resources they have to do it with. But a little piece of me dies every week that I got to go in there and mix on that thing. It is just horrible. It loses the scribble strips about every 3 or 4 weeks. I got to relabel everything. It's to a point now, I've done it so many times, I almost just have everything memorized where it is and don't even need the scribble strips. But it doesn't save the scenes correctly. The stuff you're telling it to save, it won't save. The compressors are pretty much there for looks. They don't really do much. The EQ is fair at best. I don't think it's really even a great EQ. The Verb on the first couple generations was horrible and just unusable. The Verb is actually on the AI is decent. It's not great, it's decent. Delay is decent, definitely not great, but decent. It's usable. And if you can keep one running, that's kind of where we are with the church I work for on Sundays is that, we're just trying to keep it running because, the church has got their hands in a bunch of other things they're trying to get done here first before we go sink a whole boatload of money into tech. But, every week I'm kind of just crossing my fingers to see what's going to happen. It's only a matter of time before the thing fails, It could fail this week. It might fail 2 years from now. I don't know, but it will fail. I've had literally hundreds of these things, on gigs with me. I'm just thinking about the horror stories that I have been through. I've seen them turn themselves up and down in volume. I've seen them shut off. I did a gig one time at a club that had, I'm pretty sure it was an AI. Yeah. And standing there, we did sound check. Everything was fine. You kind of, bustle your way through the workflow. I think the workflow is not very good on the Presonus. And, 5 minutes before the show starts, the console shut off. And Presonus is one of those consoles where if it shuts off, then it doesn't remember where it was when you turn it back on, At least that console didn't. And, man, what a mess. So here I am 5 minutes before showtime trying to eyeball. We were running monitors off that board too, I had to eyeball everything back in and by 3 or 4 songs into the set, we had it back under control. But now I'm like, is this thing going to shut off in the middle of the show now? I mean, I've literally seen dozens upon dozens upon dozens of situations like that with Presonus where they have just been horrible. They have a rack mixer out right now that I actually toyed with the idea of maybe buying about 6 months ago. Because it's a 32 channel, all the inputs are on the front of the rack, which is what I really like. I think that makes for a real easy workflow. But, you know, as with all the other Presonus stuff, the more I got poking around online with guys that are using them and stuff, they all had issues. They all were having problems with them. And you know what? Maybe you got the one that never had any problem. You've been using a first gen for 20 years and you still use it every week at your nightclub or with your mobile system. And hey, man, more power to you. I'm telling you, literally, I have, you know, worked on 150 or 200 of those things over the years, and every single one of them had some kind of goofy thing that was wrong with it. Moving right along, Mackie DL32R, DL32S. They have two versions of it now. The R was the original. It's kind of the hot rodded version with all of the extra recording capabilities and, you know, that kind of stuff. Mackie is known for building stuff like tanks, you know. It's known for being okay sounding, middle of the road, economically conscious, you know, gear that will last. Let me just put it that way. I still carry a 1604 analog console in my trailer in case I ever lose a digital mixer. I could at least, you know, get through a show or something. And that thing is probably 20 years old, and I could hook it up and do a corporate show with it tomorrow. That's just kind of the way it is. And, you know, the DL stuff is a solid format. You know, it's a Wi-Fi based rack mixer, 32 inputs on the front with like, I think 14 outputs, 12, 14 outputs. I think the R might have 14 and the S may have 12, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong about that. I'm not a Mackie expert, but I'm trying to say good things about them because, you know, I've installed a bunch of the Mackie DLRs in churches. They work well. They got a lot of outputs. You know, they're pretty user friendly to teach, you know, people how to use, you know, and that sort of thing. So it's not a huge learning curve if you understand basic stuff. I used to have a DL32R. I didn't care for the workflow and ended up selling it for a friend of mine because I really was just kind of stuck on the X and M32, you know, setups and really liked that workflow better. But you know, the EQs are okay. You know, the compressors are okay. The effects have gotten better on the last update, which is super cool. If I was to get a crazy good deal on one, I would definitely buy one. You know, I would buy it, do a factory reset, make sure it's up to date, and probably just put it in a rig for a backup mixer or something like that, or in a C rig I send out on corporate gigs or some kind. They're perfect for corporate stuff, you know, and you can pick them up used for, I don't know, $700 to $900 or something like that. You know, I wouldn't be afraid to buy one used as long as it looked like it'd been taken care of, you know, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, so that's, you know, kind of the Mackie thing. I mean, I don't own a bunch of Mackie stuff. I think I just recently bought 4 of the SRM 450s. Just to put on sticks to do corporate stuff with, or if I needed a powered monitor here or there, you know, I could use, you know, that to supplement my passive monitor rig, or if I'm doing just a control package only walk-in gig and need some real quick and easy, you know, floor monitors, you know, those powered monitors are good. And I think I got the pair for like $1,100. I mean, again, very economical. They sound okay, you know, and they have a reputation for lasting. So, yeah, so that's the Mackie thing. Next on the chopping block is Soundcraft. So I have always been a huge fan of Soundcraft, going way back in the analog days. Spent a lot of time on Series 5s and Series 2s and, you know, just all the VCA consoles and stuff like that. They always just had that classic British, you know, warmth to them. These middle of the road mixers I'm talking about don't necessarily have that. I mean, I'm just going to be real. Because they're budget consoles, you know, these are all budget mixers that we're talking about. And they're going to sound good. They're going to sound fine for, you know, middle market type club to country, county fair, you know, kind of stuff or whatever, or at your local country club or, you know, whatever. But, you know, they're not Digico. They're not, they're not a PM10 or, you know, some other crazy stuff that they're using with, you know, Motley Crue or something. but they'll get it done. You know, I'm a big fan of the UI mixers. It's a rack mixer. It does not have a control surface. When I say control surface, I mean it doesn't have physical faders and knobs and a screen to navigate through. It is Wi-Fi only controlled, which means you're going to need a tablet or an iPad in order to control it. The cool thing about the UI is that it has its own browser-based interface, so you don't download an app to run the console. You just open up Safari or Google Chrome or whatever you're using to surf the internet with, and you put in an address, and it brings up, you know, the user interface. It's super cool. You know, UI, user interface, you know, it's built in. It even has a little 2.4 gigahertz router built into the mixer, which is okay on stage. I know a lot of guys that use these as ear mixers. You know, they use it with a split snake. I sell them to bands all the time when I'm doing their ear rigs, you know, because they work well that way. They make it in, 12, 16, and 24 channel, you know, configurations. One of the things, there's two things I don't like about them. One of the things is how they do their channel count. So the UI 24R has 20 XLR inputs, 2 RCA inputs, and then they're counting a USB left-right input to get you to 24. So the 16 channel version has 12 XLR inputs. And then the 12 channel has 8 XLR inputs. I think it's the dumbest thing, you know, in the world to set them up that way. Just give us 24 XLRs, 16 XLRs. I don't know, man. I don't know where these guys are sometimes when they configure this stuff. The other thing I don't like about it is I think the tap is pretty weak. Like it does okay for a short delay kind of setting, a quick tap kind of setting. It does all right for that, layered on top of the reverb. Now, the reverb is phenomenal in the UI. You know, it says Lexicon reverb. You know, that's the cool thing about when you buy stuff from the Harman Group. The Harman is the mother company that makes Crown, JBL, Soundcraft, DBX, Lexicon, and the list goes on. Digitech. You know, there's some Digitech direct input guitar features on these UI mixers as well. You could plug your acoustic or electric guitar right into it, and there's some Digitech buzzers and whistles in there for you guitar players. But, you know, these mixers have DBX, you know, EQs, DBX compressors, and Lexicon effects. And, I mean, they work. They work well. You know, I really like that mixer. The user interface is a little different than some of the other apps, you know, and these other mixers. The way they set up, you know, gain staging with input gain and output gain and some of the routing or whatever is a little weird on that thing. It's going to take a little getting used to, you know, but I didn't really struggle with it. And I'm the guy who will just bellyache and complain about, you know, hard to navigate user interfaces. But I know some lower end guys that are just getting into digital and just getting into Wi-Fi mixing, maybe have only ever mixed on one brand of, you know, maybe they've only mixed on the Mackies or whatever, and they go to mix on a UI and they're kind of lost because it's a different setup, you know. So you need to take the time to go through the YouTube tutors and learn how to use that mixer. It's not rocket science, but it's a lot of bang for your buck, man. They just raised the price of the 24, which I think was a mistake because they're selling, I think their biggest selling point really was the fact that you used to be able to get a UI 24 for about, brand new, for about $900 or $1,000. Now I think they're about $1,200 or $1,300, and that kind of gets them in the same price range as the X32 rack and some of that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's going to be very competitive, honestly. It's just my opinion on it. When they were at that, most of the guys that I do ear systems with, they'll use the 16 channel version because it has 12 inputs. And if you're just in a 4-piece rock band, you can fit, you know, your band in 12 inputs. You know, you can. I know one band in particular that did bass, drums, and guitar and 3 vocals. And they're using that mixer to this day. They'll use it this weekend with their ears, and we did a 16 channel split with them, and there you go. You know, you're good to go with that. The other side of the Soundcraft conversation is the SI, and that is the control surface based digital consoles like the Expression or the Impact. You know, those things, they have a feature on them called Fader Glow that I think is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think every work surface based, digital mixer should have that Fader Glow feature. And what Fader Glow is it sounds exactly like it says. The faders, they have LEDs behind the little slots that the faders go up and down in, and those LEDs change colors as to what layer you're on. So at a glance, especially in the dark, because we spend most of our life mixing in the dark anyways, in the dark, you can see where you are. You can see what layer you're on just at a glance, whether it's mono inputs, stereo inputs, whether you're on the aux layer, blah, 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 whatever. Some guys have complained about the SIs that they don't have subgroup outs, but they have like 16 outputs. And if you really got to have some subgroups, and I'm a subgroup guy, I like subgroups, just designate a couple of them as subgroups and then do your group compression and the stuff you're going to do in subgroups that way. You can work around it is what I'm getting at. Reverb is really good. You got another lexicon unit inside there, DBX, EQs and compressors and gates. So I'm very happy with that. But once again, the delay is a problem. The tap works. It doesn't necessarily work so good on the UI, but on the SI, it does work, but it doesn't stay in time right, and I know the band tends to move around when they're playing a song, and you got to, reset the tap, 3 or 4 times throughout the song anyways. I just am in a mode where I set my long delay tap before any section of the song that I'm going to use it in. That way it's as close to, the tempo of the song as I can get, and it's going to fly in and out the way I want it to. The SI, man, you'd set the tap and within 2 or 3 blinks of the light, it's out of whack. I don't know what's going on with that. They have released some updates that I haven't been on an SI since those updates, so that may have changed, but they're very good middle of the road consoles. I think they sound as good as an X or an M32 or the Allen and Heath Q or the Yamaha TF. All those consoles basically, sound the same. One may be a hair warmer than another, but listen, guys, in the realm of, and I'll do another video on this, but in the realm of digital mixing, the one thing we lost when we went to digital was that natural, fat, warm analog sound. So now you have to have a really good ear for frequency and compression to be able to mimic that. And if you're an engineer who knows how to do that, then you don't struggle with these middle-of-the-road consoles. If you're someone who mixes with your eyes and doesn't really take the time to learn the ins and outs of that, your mix is probably going to sound a little harsh and a little thin, because digital gives you an exact mirror of what is in front of the microphone. It is the epitome of sound reinforcement. It's going to reinforce exactly what you give it. So crap in, crap out. And if you're trying to make your system sound nice and fat, there's a variety of other things that you need to do to make that stuff happen. And it's at this point in the video, I'm going to hit the pause button and kind of ask you to please subscribe to this channel, share this channel with all your musician buddies and your sound engineering buddies, or maybe your tech team at your church or something like that. Hit the bell icon so you're getting notifications when I post videos. I try to put up at least 1 or 2 videos a week. I think here we're in the middle of warm weather now, and summer's really kicking off, and I'm crazy busy. Now I'm trying to pound all this content around a very busy schedule musically. So I'm getting at least 1 video up a week. Go over to TikTok and make sure that you're following the Grumpy Sound Guy over there. Go to Facebook and give my company a like, CLP Audio. Just search for that. We're getting ready to get into staging. That's going to be, we're going to be pushing that pretty hard probably within the next 30 or 60 days. Big things happening with CLP Audio and with the Grumpy Sound Guy. And I don't want you guys to miss a second of any of that stuff, okay? I want you to stay in the loop with all that. And with that said, that brings us to our next brand that we're going to talk about, and that is Allen and Heath. Allen and Heath is another company that I have been a huge fan of for many, many years, especially back in the analog days. Ran tons and tons of the GL line stuff. 3300s, 2400s, just Really, really super cool company, British company. They've been around forever. They know how to do things right. They really do. I don't have a boatload of experience on the Q series or the SQ series, but I know a whole boatload of guys that use that stuff regularly, and I get the impression that the Q series is just as comparable as any of these other mixers. It's a little more easier on your wallet than the SQ, but the SQ is a 96K console, so that's definitely a step up the ladder. My personal opinion is I think the SQ line of mixers from Allen and Heath is probably going to take over the world, in the next 10 years, maybe not even that long, maybe in the next 5 or 7 years. They got a really good thing going on there. The processing power is ridiculous. It basically, in a nutshell, has a whole bunch of big boy features and a middle market console. And I really think that's going to grab a hold at some point and get moving forward. The downside is it's about $1,000 more than the M32, So the SQ is, I don't know if that's going to hurt it. If I'll tell you what, Allen and Heath, if you're listening to me, do this. Create a 32 channel input, 16 output rack mixer with the core, the brains of the SQ. And give us that. Don't put any kind of router or any networking in it. Let us handle that stuff on our own. That's the mistake I think some of these other companies have made. Like even when you get into the Behringer XR line, and stuff like that, those little routers are always crap, man. They work okay on stage if you're standing right next to it, but no one's going to be able to mix on that in a crowded room, from 60, 70 feet away on an iPad. They're always going to have to run an external router and probably a point of access or something to be able to get up on the 5G and get enough range of 5G. So don't worry about the networking. Allen and Heath, give us a 32 by 16 SQ rack mixer, no work surface. And let that rack mixer double as a stage box for like an SQ6 or an SQ7. So we can put an SQ7 out front, run a Cat 6 or a Cat 5e to the rack mixer on stage, and we can Wi-Fi mix monitors and then have a control surface out front for all the band engineers and that sort of thing. You create that format and find some way to lower the price even by $300 or $500. And I know it's tough with inflation the way it is. And you'll probably kick Midas M32 off its high horse. I'm just being real. And that's just what the industry is bearing right now. A lot of cats that were selling, X's and M32s like crazy are now kind of backing off because Music Tribe, which is the group that makes Behringer and Midas, they did a bunch of goofy stuff trying to keep pricing down, got rid of a bunch of distributors. You can now only get that stuff through a handful of distributors now in the United States. And there's literally no service in North America. There's like one place in Vegas, and that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. And that might be, the thing that puts a fork in those guys with those mixers. And I hate to say it because I love that stuff. I love the workflow. I'm getting ready to talk about, the X and the M here in a minute. But, Allen and Heath, if you can give us something, a little bit more bang for our buck there and help us out. Inflation's hitting us as hard as it is you guys. I know you're having a hard time getting, circuit boards and microprocessors and all that kind of stuff. And it's a strange world we're living in right now. I get it. But Allen and Heath stuff has always been built like tanks. The stuff always lasts forever. I really don't know if I've ever seen a catastrophic failure of an Allen and Heath console. I know some of the D-Live stuff had some issues in first gen format. Anytime you start something new, there's usually some bugs to work out. But that Avante console that's out right now is by Allen and Heath is ridiculous. It's really, really cool. It's a step above the SQ, and it's a little more cheddar. I mean, I think you're up around, I don't know, eight or $9 grand, for the Avante. But man, golly, is that console cool, man. If I could afford one and if it was a little more rider friendly, I'd probably go ahead and make the switch, but we're not quite there yet. So again, this is just my opinion. This is just how I see it. That doesn't mean that I'm right. It's just, what I hear going around the markets, my reps, the things that they're telling me. I deal with Sweetwater. I deal with, Washington Music Center. I deal with, B&H. I deal with Full Compass. All the big guys, I buy from all those guys. And I talk to those guys, and, I've heard what they have to say about, these different brands, and that's what's forming these opinions. So, you can't go wrong with Allen and Heath. If you buy the QU or the SQ, either one, I think you're going to be happy, and I think you're going to be able to do whatever it is that you want to do. Next on our list is the brand that I have the least amount of experience with. So I am really only going to be sharing my opinion from a perspective of talking to people who use these mixers, and that is Yamaha. For whatever weird, strange reason, my whole career trajectory has always been Allen and Heath, Soundcraft, Midas. That's really where I've spent, even in analog days, that's where I spent all my time. I didn't spend a whole bunch of time, with Yamaha. I just didn't. I didn't run any of the PM5 stuff when that was huge and, took over the whole pro touring market. I shadowed a bunch of guys on them, but I never actually ran one. LS9s had a whole bunch of problems in workflow. Guys, constantly complained about how much they hated the LS9 because you had to dig through layers and layers and layers to get the stuff. And it really was not a very user-friendly interface. And I've had my hands on an LS9 and know how it works. And I agree 100%. But they came out with this TF line, which is their middle market line of stuff. I've went through all the tutors on the CL, and what's the other one? They have two lines above or below like the PM line. I'm drawing a blank right now. That's how much I know about Yamaha. Anyways, I know a bunch of churches that use the CLs and that sort of stuff. And I mean, they seem much more user-friendly. They sound great, I have run the M7C. Love the console, love the effects, EQs, everything was correct. But the console was a little harsh to me, it just kind of came off. I was running on a D&B rig, and it just came off a little harsh. It should have been a bit warmer. I found myself EQing away some of that harshness, so it is what it is. But the one thing I do know about Yamaha that I can speak with confidence is it's a quality company. Now, I just ran into a rep at a show I was at on Saturday that reps Yamaha, and he said that they're almost a year out in trying to get a Yamaha console now. So if you're trying to buy a Yamaha mixer, you're going to have to either find somebody that has one on the shelf, or you're just going to have to wait. I know economically, I don't think they're cheap consoles. I think they're on the upper end of, our price range here. I'm sure there's TFs within that $1,000 to $1,400, range. And I know a whole bunch of, I just noticed I was at a marching band competition not long ago. I am a total geek for drum and bugle corps stuff because I'm a drummer, and I used to do drum and bugle corps stuff. And I noticed that every band that was coming out, I think I was at James Madison University, and every band that was coming out on this college level was all using Yamaha TF consoles. I'm like, there must be a rep going around selling these. Like their rep must be a Yamaha, their music rep must be a Yamaha rep as well, because all these schools, all these high schools were using Yamaha TF mixers. And man, if they can endure that nightmare, man, I wouldn't be afraid to buy one. If I got a good deal on a TF, I'd buy one in a second. If I got a good deal, on a CL, I would definitely buy one of those in a second, I'm the kind of guy that would almost like to just buy an LS9 just to say that I conquered it, and I was able to, get really efficient with using it. But I just don't have that kind of expendable income laying around to be able to do that sort of thing. So it is what it is. And if I'm going in that direction, I would probably go Digico SD9 or SD10 or, any number, Avid. I really like the Avid stuff. I've run some of the Avid stuff, and you can get a Midas Pro 2 for, I don't know, 15 or 20 grand these days used, with a stage box or whatever. So that's kind of what I would do with that, and that's kind of my take on Yamaha. I don't think you can go wrong with Yamaha, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there, you know, if you're not used to their layout. And last but certainly not least is the Behringer X32 / Midas M32. So let's just right out of the gate get this out of the way. The only difference between the two consoles is a whole bunch of hardware. The M32 is built better. The M32 is built with Nutrix connections, and the hardware is just better hardware. The software is identical. They claim the preamps are different, and I do know by the model number that they are different preamps in the M32 than the X32. Dave Rat from Rat Audio did a head-to-head on his YouTube channel, and the only thing he could find sonically different was that the M32 had a lower noise floor, which just means that the M32 is a little quieter, and that's probably due to the better, more quality preamps. So for my money, I'll spend the extra $1,000, $1,200 and get the M. I mean, that's just where I'm at. I probably have, I don't know. I'm going to say I probably have 500 shows on an X32 and probably close to double that on an M32 at this stage of the game. So I have a lot of time on this format, and I have a lot of experience using first gen X32, second gen X32, and the system I use most for clubs is a M32C, which is just a core. It's just a one rack space brains of the M32, along with a DL32 stage box, which is a 32 in, 16 out Midas stage box. So all the preamps are actually in the stage box. And that takes up about, I don't know, 4 or 5. I think it takes up 5 spaces in the bottom of my control rack. And man, it works like butter. I love it. I have a router hooked up to the back of it, and then a TP-Link point of access that gives me, I think, 500 yards of 5G. As long as I have line of sight, I'm usually really good. I use Mixing Station as the app for to control those things. The OEM app, the M and X32 OEM app, the stock app, has some issues. I've had problems with it crashing. It has latency issues, definitely. Of course, a lot of times the latency issues is due to the type of router and how you're doing your networking. Man, I can't stress that enough. And again, I will do a video on Wi-Fi mixing. We'll try and do that next week because I know that's an in-demand thing. And we'll talk about the importance of networking. That's usually where you're going to make your mistakes at, is in the networking side. But the M32 is the Mixing Station app is much, much more responsive and configurable, or how do you say that? Configurability? Yeah. I like the fact that I can configure the Mixing Station app any way I want. With the OEM app, you can't do that. With the stock app, you're just stuck with however they do it. And usually, especially if you want to do your tap delay, you got to open the effects, tab every time you want to do a tap. Change a tap. And if you change the tap 2 or 3, 4 times in a song like I do sometimes, then that is kind of a big deal, to where with the Mixing Station app, I can configure the control section any way I want, and I always put that long delay tap on the top layer so I don't have any issues getting to it when I want it. And that app will work with M32, X32, the XR series of Behringer consoles, and the Behringer Wing. It will also work on the Soundcraft SI consoles, and it will also work on, what's the one I'm missing? All the Allen and Heath stuff. The Q, and I think the SQ. I think it even work on the SQ. So it's a very versatile app. And like I said, we'll talk about that more next week in the Wi-Fi mixing video. But, what can I say, man? Uni Behringer is a freaking genius. He's seen what Presonus was doing with digital consoles. He's seen where it was heading, and he made up his mind that he was going to, present a 32-channel console with motorized faders, digital console for the price of an analog console. You know, I remember like when the first X32s came out, they were like $2,200 or something, man. 24, you know, somewhere in that ballpark. Well, man, you couldn't, a GL 2400 Allen and Heath analog console was $2,400, you know? And then you'd have to spend another, you know, $3,000 in outboard gear, you know, to get all the gates and compressors and EQs and everything that just comes stock with the X32. So he made it so economically, you know, sensible that people who swore they'd never be on digital consoles started buying digital consoles, and it worked a whole group, a whole generation of guys into the digital mixing scene. He basically, by offering this, you know, economically conscious digital console for just about anybody could afford one, he trained a whole group of people in how to use digital mixers. Because, you know, guys that were hauling around, you know, 2 front of house racks, effects racks and EQs and compressors and gates and everything else, when they realized they didn't have to do that anymore, that all they had to do is, you know, put a little bit of time in on YouTube or something and learn how to use this thing, or, you know, hire a local engineer to come to their house and teach them how to use it, then, man, it took off. And Ui and Behringer, that X32 just swept the market like nuts. They probably sold more X32s than they have any two of any other kind of digital console in the market. And that's just my own guesstimation. I feel pretty confident about that number. So the mistake they made was during that time, and I read an interview with Ui and Behringer talking about this very subject. During that time, he was trying to move manufacturing to China. And the mistake he made was, and this was quote unquote from Ui himself, he said, you can't run a company over a fax machine. You know, he was trying to trust Chinese manufacturers to manufacture his products to his specs and keep quality control in place. And that just did not pan out, you know, and it almost cost him his company. Because I was working at Washington Music Center at the time when all that was going on, and I was just wholeheartedly against the X32. I was not someone who was a big fan of the X32. The digital thing just had not really taken over the world yet, and it still needed to grow. There was a lot of growing pains with the Presonus stuff that was going on, and I just couldn't bring myself to spend the money. I couldn't. And then working and seeing the Behringer stuff come back in the door as quick as it was going out when I was at Chuck Levin's, man, I mean, that was tough, you know. Those were hard times to be a salesman, you know, to sell somebody something and they come back a month later and the thing's, you know, it's a turd, it's a boat anchor, you know, the thing don't want to work. So he had to make some real big changes real quick. So those first generation X32s, I think we're probably to a point now where most of them have, you know, made it to the landfill. But by the time he got to the second gen, he was sending his own quality control people over there. He acquired Midas. He bought Midas and formed the company Music Tribe. And that is the mother company now that makes Clark Techniques, Midas, you know. And he didn't jack with Midas. He let Midas be who Midas always was, which was very smart. It was I mean, the guy's not dumb, you know. It was a real smart move on his part, because it saved his company. You know, it really did. And, you know, then they came out with the M32. They took what was great about the X32 and kept it. And they took what sucked about the X32 and they fixed it. And most of that was hardware issues. So when you buy an M32, you're basically buying a hot-rodded X32. You know, preamps are a little better. You know, I think the delays are great. The verbs are okay. I'm not a huge fan of the verbs. I don't think the verbs are stellar. They're definitely not lexicon verbs, you know, or any kind of high-end verb, but it's verb enough to get the job done, you know. I usually layer verb and short delay on top of each other on a DCA and then long delay on another DCA return, so I can, you know, do what I do that way. And that's how I have it set up in the iPad and how I have it set up on the work surface, because I have a M32 Live as well. I just don't have the Wi-Fi version of it. I have the live version because, you know, when I need to put a console out front for a band engineer at your county fair or something, I need to be able to do that. I love both of them. I love the workflow of the M32 Live because of the front of it kind of sets up instead of setting down. That was the problem I had with the X32 is I always felt like I was leaning over the console to see the screen, to see the knobs, you know, for the dynamic section and stuff like that. I don't have that problem on the M32. You know, the M32 is just rock solid that way. There's some guys that are talking smack about the M32. I love it. I absolutely love it. I haven't had any issues whatsoever with it. I haven't had an M32 fail on me. You know, I mean, knock on table here, wood, something. You know, I don't have any wood close by. But, you know, my rep swears to God that they're all going to, you know, blow up and catch on fire tomorrow. And he's pushing everybody toward Allen and Heath. And I know why he's doing that. It's because that's probably where the market's going to end up going. Unless they rework the M32 in a 96K format and give it some of the buzzers and whistles the SQ has, you know, I don't know that the M32 is going to hold its king of the hill status forever. But let me say this. You know, when I'm advancing a show with a B National or something like that, and they ask me what I got out front, and I tell them an M32, that's never an issue. It is an industry standard, you know, and usually they're like, okay, cool, I already have a show file for that, so I can just walk in with my thumb drive and load my show file, and bam, we're off to the races. And that's the advantage of the M and X32 line. And all the scenes from the X32, you can load right into the M32 and vice versa. A lot of these B Nationals are traveling with an M32C DL32 stage box setup with a split snake like I have. And that's what they're running ears on, you know, and they're just, you know, sending a split tail to front of house and letting front of house do its thing, you know. So yeah, I like the workflow of it. It's my go-to rig. You know, I think if I had to look into a crystal ball and tell you where I'm going to go in the next 10 years, you know, not knowing what's going to be released in the next 10 years, with the stuff that's on the market right now, I would say in 10 years, I'll probably own an Allen and Heath SQ, you know, or something like that. But we'll see what Midas and Behringer has coming forward. The wing is a great console. I love the wing. I would have bought a wing instead of an M32 to put out front. But the problem is the wing isn't as rider friendly. And the wing reminds me of the first gen X32s, man. I just have a problem trusting them, you know, because I don't want to blow $3,600, $3,800 on a wing and maybe it'll do what I want it to do, and maybe it won't, when I can blow that same money on an M32 and know what it's going to do because it's already proven. The wing is still kind of new. It's only been out a few years. I haven't heard anybody talking about catastrophic issues with it, so I'm not talking smack about the wing, you know, but at the same time, you can configure them in so many different ways that the thing that I have run into and the thing I have heard band engineers talking about is, you know, if I ran a wing on Thursday night at venue A with production company A, but then have to run sound on a wing on Saturday night with production company B, everybody configures those consoles differently, you know? So yeah, he can load a show file in from one to the other, but, you know, routing seems to get a little weird, the way they route effects and stuff like, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think it's there yet. If they had a Midas version of the wing, I might feel a little bit better about that. And not to mention the thing is like silver or white or something. It looks like a lighting console to me. Like I don't know, man. I mean, you know, if you're a wing guy, cool, awesome. You know, wings are cool. They have my seal of approval, but I'm not buying one anytime soon. You know, I don't see me going in that direction. Maybe to make a liar out of me. I don't know. Maybe 5 years from now, the wing will be where it's at. Who knows? You know. I have shadowed some guys on those consoles. I've heard them many, many times. You know, at shows, they sound fine. They sound as good as the M32. But I don't know, man. The effects looked really cool in it. I like how the effects was set up in it, you know. But for my money, I got to go with the sure thing. And right now, the most rider-friendly go-to console on the scene is the M32 and X32 lineup, specifically the M. You know, so that's where I am, and that's what it looks like from my perspective. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.